What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with my good buddy Fredric Hinkle. He is a sophomore communications major from Sugarland, Texas, and he is here to talk about his passions and experiences with Spikeball, with competition and sports in general, his experience in the church, growing up in the church, and how that's helped him and influenced him coming into college and going through college. We're so glad he's here, but without further ado, going to pray this episode in so we can get started. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day, for this wonderful afternoon that we can come together and lift you up and talk about you, talk about our own lives, and hopefully grow closer together as brothers. We pray that this conversation will be glorifying to you, that we would be eloquent in our speech, that we would be edifying as well, that we wouldn't be trying to put down anybody outside of this room, but that we would truly be curious enough and bold enough to explore some of the avenues and thoughts that aren't often talked about, aren't often thought about, and just kind of come to better terms with who you are and what your will is for living this life in college and coming outside into the community, God. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
Did I say your last name right? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you did. You're
Hinkle.
good.
Okay, because you gave me a weird look when I said it. I was like, I better not have just mispronounced that.
Yeah.
But it's good. So, first things first, you, my friend, are a stellar athlete. You just got back from a tournament in Baylor yesterday. A lot of fun.
We had a great time. Had a good partner.
Yeah.
Didn't get our result, but we had a good time. We played pretty well for most of the day. So
Well, granted, your definition of not getting the result was going to the championship round and losing. It was probably a close match. Was it a close match? Or?
Yeah, we lost in extras in the first game and then by 2 points in the second. So as close as it could be, it was. So.
Yeah, so that's your definition of not getting the result.
That's at a high level. That's really what it comes down to, though. It's just you really want to perform, especially against teams you really know you can beat or have an opportunity to play well against. So.
Yeah, had you played against them before? Did you know who they were?
Yeah, I knew both of these guys. They're like the Texas team.
Gotcha.
We knew that this is essentially the only team in Texas that I'm sitting here going, I don't know if I could beat them. Every other tournament it's, they aren't there. It's going to be another easy one. Here we go. But this was the one where they were showing up and we knew it. I really wanted to take it to them. I really wanted to get that win.
So are Spikeball tournaments where you have a lot of downtime getting to watch other rounds take place, or are you kind of up and about the whole day?
I could have downtime at tournaments, but if I ever do, I generally tend to play pickup. So if there are just people around that I don't really know or want to meet, I'll go and just try to start a game because I really want to meet a lot of like the newer up and coming players. Because for me, I play a lot of high level games with strong players, so I don't really get to meet the new people. And I always want to meet new people coming up and see who's going to be good here later. Try to meet everyone in the community, and that's really the fun part of it.
Yeah. How can you identify a good player? Because you've got a lot of skill and a lot of experience going through matches and winning tournaments. Yeah. When you're playing these pickup games with other guys, how can you look at a guy and say, man, this kid's going to be really something?
It's really tough sometimes because you have some people that are really technical or finesse players. And at a low level, it's very hard for you to sit there and pick up that he's going to be great at this here in a little bit. And then there are other guys where it's much easier because he's just got loads of power in his swing. He really strikes the ball hard with a lot of action on the net. And you sit there and go, oh my goodness, I do not want to play against this guy. Yeah. So it's on a low level, watching a newer player, it's just, does he have these innate, powerful swings? Are they just natural to him? Because you get so many athletes from so many different sports coming into the game that everybody has all these different motions and all these different swings that they want to play with. So just seeing somebody with a different swing can be kind of hard to recognize. But if it has that power, that natural stroke, you just sit there and go, oh my goodness. A little bit
unorthodox.
He's going to be there. Yeah.
I don't have nearly the experience, even watching Spikeball, to kind of analyze a swing, but I know something with tennis that's been really big for me, having coached it. I can tell who has played football. I can tell who's played basketball. Yeah, exactly. I can tell especially who's played baseball, because kids who play baseball want to come in and hit their backhand up and they'll sail it over the fence, and they don't know how to keep the ball down over the net and into the court. But basketball players, football players, everyone seems to have a degree of coordination with their feet. You can tell who at least knows how to run and has some background. And baseball players tend to also have bigger serves, but they also struggle. There's a bit of a bell curve or maybe an S-curve is a better way to describe it, where it starts really, really well, but then they just plateau because they're so focused on using their shoulder to just throw everything into it, but they don't have the little pronations and the idiosyncrasies that differentiate a pitch from a serve, and it's hard to tear all that baseball training away.
Having a solid understanding of what you're biomechanically doing, like with a kinetic chain, as a pitcher is a huge focus that a lot of coaches these days really struggle to teach. We're getting more into this analysis in the baseball community where we're going to sit here and say, what's the most optimal way to generate power? Because forever it's just been throw it as hard as you can.
Right.
And I mean, obviously in tennis, the goal is not swing it as hard as you can. There's actually a kinetic chain taking place here. And I know y'all preach it a lot, and that's where I've received some of this rhetoric that I apply it to baseball, and it's very effective for me. And now to Spikeball, I mean, just understanding the motion of the human body has been huge. I think that tennis gives just a fantastic platform for that.
Yeah, it's very, because the way, at least a forehand and a serve has been described to me as almost like a spring with a twist in it.
Yeah.
So it's like you're taking a coil and you're squeezing it down, and then you're twisting the coil in your hand, and you want it to pop up and twist out. And it's very hard to explain that to people who are used to moving in one direction.
Yeah, from a visualization standpoint, I understand what you're saying, because every time you see tennis players take a serve, they have that slight dip where they drop their shoulders, they bend their knees before they explode upwards with that massive twist in the hips and create separation from the hips and their shoulders so they can fire and really explode into the ball. For pitchers, it's mostly the legs.
It's a lot of forward motion.
Right.
Yeah.
So the struggle for pitchers is, the strongest part of your body is your legs.
Yeah.
So transferring energy from your legs to your arm is a very difficult process, especially when you're pushing yourself forward and you want to create a rotational energy.
Yeah.
This isn't an efficient way to do it generally. So
and especially off of, because you have the back plant. I guess in tennis we call it the outside leg.
Right.
But in tennis you have this immense ability to use both legs to turn your hips.
Right.
And to bring those hips around and get that rotational energy.
Yeah.
But with pitchers, you, for one, have to balance on one leg.
Yeah.
Which takes a lot more. Like, your ability to generate power, for one, just from one leg to two legs is incredibly difficult or different, But then just anytime you have to balance yourself and hold yourself up.
It's so difficult.
It's so difficult to take because you're inherently stiff. It's a lot of isometric energy.
Right.
A lot of potential energy. To transfer that into kinetic energy takes a lot of practice and due diligence.
This is the big change that we've seen in the last probably 8 years in pitching. A lot of guys have actually taken a balance point out of their rotation. It's just a drive down the mound and really explode with a pitch. So we've seen this massive power explosion in the game of all these guys throwing hard, and that's a big reason why the balance point at the top of the leg kick is no longer there. Guys just push down the mound and throw a pitch. There's no reason to have that, so they took it out.
Yeah, because I know, that's been in the game for a while.
Oh, yeah, 100 years.
Yeah, for one, the balance point, but also not having a balance point as well in terms of switching off. If you got a guy on second, you're not going to sit in your balance point because he's got a lead, and you're not going to waste that time. But to do that, almost in isolation, and not give them, because there's something about giving them different looks as well.
Yes.
And so being able, I feel like you can conceal a lot more with the balance point. You can keep the glove behind you in a way.
That's fair. There's so much there. There's so many different things that you can do. These days, the catcher's arms are getting a lot better. The pitchers are getting down the mound faster, so they're just kind of betting that they can push down the mound faster, and they don't even have to worry about it. Just our time is better than your time. We're going to throw you out. They don't really want to play this game of, ooh, I can pick you off with this clever move.
Right.
It's just so iffy, and they're hesitant to try it. So, you see
not a lot of risk takers anymore.
It's really the case. There's so few hits in the game today. You just see so many home runs that there's no real point in just taking a risk. So, that aspect of the game is starting to leave, but...
Yeah. Because it looks like such a slow game if you haven't been introduced to it, but you don't realize how much is actually going on in the field. And if you're defending and you're on the field, you're almost trying to work to make sure that nothing happens, and you want everything to be completely still.
That would be fantastic.
Right. Yeah. But when something does happen, suddenly everybody's moving, and there's nobody who can sit still and pick daisies.
It's very true, yeah. It's always the coach's nightmare when you sit there and you have this one player that is not paying attention or out of focus, because everybody has to rely on the other players in the field to actually do their job. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen correctly. So coaches are always on people very hard for any screw up, any mental error. It has to be perfect. I mean, especially at a high level, you watch these MLB guys, and it is just unbelievable the stuff that they do. Everything is timed up so well. I honestly, I went to a game. I hadn't gone to a game. I watch online frequently, and I mean video. But I went to a game maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I couldn't believe how fast it really felt live, and you don't really get that feel when you just watch on TV. And I'd forgotten it because it'd been a while since I'd been to a pro game and watched too much high school. I mean, playing personally, and you sit there and it's undescribable.
Yeah, because it's just a different pace, and it seems like, again, watching from the stands, you can see the difference in the players if you're watching them, but of course you're kind of in the nosebleeds looking on. You can't see how much they're actually moving. What looks like an inch for you is them migrating yards, you know, to cover, and different holes that they got to set up in pockets. Because they, at least between the pitcher and the catcher, I know catchers, I had to learn different batters and their swings and their tendencies, and that was what my dad had me do, was watch a ton of film and a ton of baseball, or just watch live, honestly. You know, because you don't want to, I don't know, whatever. But you would take notes of, for one, where the pitcher is throwing and get vibes on the pitcher, but then also where batters like to hit and where batters don't like to hit, and you see that almost unspoken communication. There's a lot of times where the catcher does communicate and shift the pockets, but when a shift happens, you know, there's a lot of calculation.
I will say this, back to your point about sitting in the nosebleeds, not being able to see. There was a pitcher for the Rays 2 years ago, and he was a rookie, and he'd complained that the Rays had moved him from the left side of the rubber to the right side of the rubber, and his ERA went up 4 points. And you sat there and went, he moved 8 inches on the field, and his ERA went up 4 points or 3.5 points, something ridiculous. You sit there and go, man, this dude could be an all-star to, oh man, I don't think he's going to make it in the league for much longer. And the difference was that much.
I mean, and batters can see the difference too.
Oh, absolutely.
They can see the shift coming, and it's really a mental and an unspoken battle between, okay, I can see them moving, I can see the pitcher doing everything. You have to have your eyes in 3 places and then still be able to swing, make contact, accelerate through when the ball's coming 90 miles an hour over 60 feet.
I have no idea how they do it. I mean, you sit there and you watch a game, and I mean, these guys bat 300, and how? I'd bat 0 if I tried. I've seen 90, 93 a couple times, and you sit there and you just, there it goes.
You throw your shoulders.
It's like, it's gone. Where did the ball go? I missed it.
I don't know if we talked about this before, but I've read a couple of different studies in terms of baseball batters. They were studying how their reflexes were so quick, because you've got guys who can hit 90, 95 either in the cages or, you know, live.
Or even against Chapman, they're like 104.
You got people make contact. You're like, what the heck is going on here?
How?
A lot of it has to do with the white and red and the seams, and your eyes can catch things up to 30, 40 frames per second. And your brain makes those connections a lot quicker than you're consciously able to do, but your muscle memory is just so in tune with your brain that it is a reflex. They determined that it is quick enough to be a reflex, and you can kind of gauge it and control it and think ahead of time, but you're swinging in the dark almost always as an MLB
You think about this frames aspect, and like the guys sitting there and looking at the white and the red seam. They actually did a study where they evaluated like the player's eyesight. And they found out that the player's eyesight is something like four standard deviations from the mean above you and I, like what our eyes actually are. I have quality eyesight. I mean, I don't wear glasses. I'm fine. But these guys' eyesight is so unbelievably fantastic.
And keen.
And then they train it for 20 years. And they get up there and...
Well, and the difference between a night game and a day game as well is really, really big, because you have all the contrast difference, you know, and then even... I mean, uniforms, the grass, the colors, how it lines up with the field. Anything can really mess with your vision. So if something literally catches your eye and throws you off, then your swing can start.
For example, you'll see different guys hit really, really well in certain parks. Because if you actually watch a game, you'll see in center field, there will be this area where there's nobody sitting, or this grassy area or just a black built up thing. And this is like the batter's eye. Some guys love the batter's eye in certain parks. I think it was Vlad Guerrero just loved the batter's eye in Coors. So the dude would bat 400 there. And you sit there and go, well, he struggles in all these other places, but he just loves Coors. He hits the ball out of the park all the time. Yeah. You sit there and go,
Or you think about the green monster at Fenway.
Right. This one backdrop where you sit there and you're like, guys really like it. They can see the ball well out of the pitcher's hand. I mean, here and there you're going to have differences, but
it's a different vibe. It's just amazing how keenly aware they are of the discrepancies between this park and that park, this uniform and that uniform, even the colors. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's amazing because they're conscious of it. I'm sure they kind of catch a vibe,
I don't know that they are.
Exactly, which baffles me as well, how you can be so good and not know it.
Yeah, I wonder because they talk about like seeing the ball really well and man, I felt good today, just saw it out of his hand. And I mean, obviously, they could know. They must know the stats behind it. Man, it hit really well in this park. But I don't know if they're just sitting there going, it's the batter's eye here. Or there's this one thing in the park. I don't know what it is, but they might know, they might not. I bet today they're conscious of it.
Well, and there's certain pitchers as well where their arm slot you're really familiar with, or you've just played them a lot. They're within your division, so you start to get a vibe, and you get scouting reports, and you just analyze the situation as well. So there's a lot of things that make up for the reflex. So there's stuff going on in the front of your mind that influences the back of your brain.
Yeah.
And it all comes together.
And I wonder how much of that is just confidence as well. Because you had Melky Cabrera bat like 700 against Verlander while they're sitting here like everybody else is batting $150 against him, and Melky's hitting the ball out of the park. And well, why is this? No, nobody really knows. And then you sit there and you have another matchup where like Miguel Cabrera, the MVP, can't hit Wade Davis at all, and he's like 1 for 16 with 13 strikeouts. You're sitting here like these numbers are abysmal. And well, why do we have just this massive disparity? I mean, one person has a confidence, there's so much in the game. It's like, to tie it back to Spikeball for me. I know certain players that I have a personal fear of playing against, and I don't even know that's
a style gap, or
I don't even know that it's necessarily like I couldn't handle them or something. It could be like this awkwardness where I'm not really familiar with their style, or I just have like less confidence against them. And there's so much in sports that you sit there and you could put stats on it, and you can measure it as much as you want. You can sit there and you can see all the variation. And is there a reason for it? Sometimes there is, and other times it's just a feel thing. And it's such an exciting part.
Tennis is very similar, and I would do the same thing watching tennis as I would with baseball. And so I looked at guys like Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, Rafa Nadal, and there are plenty of commentators who will straight up give you the analysis of the box and where they like to hit. But I could tell you, based on the situation, based on the score, them throwing up the ball where they were going to hit it. And I started just playing the game with my dad where we wouldn't place bets or anything, but I would just say tee or wide, and I would get them right probably 80 or 90% of the time, just because part of it was I watched way too much tennis. And
so I know the feeling. Yep.
I got really familiar with just the motion and stuff like that. But I mean, guys playing them when you're sitting, down the field or down the court from a 140 mile an hour serve or a 95 mile an hour fastball, the fact that you can even react or be proactive enough to make contact. And Roger Federer is probably one of the best returners in history in my mind, partially because he doesn't get ace, but between 2004 and maybe 2008, there was a string of Wimbledon championships that he played against Andy Roddick. And I love Andy Roddick to death, but if you can pick apart Andy's game the way that Roger did, then Andy never won a match against Roger.
Wow.
And Andy had probably one of the top 3 serves of all time. He held the I think top speed record for a couple of years, upwards of 150 miles an hour, but he couldn't ace Roger. He could not ace Roger because Roger has such a beat. He knew exactly where the ball was going.
I can't imagine having like that level of understanding of another like elite performer's game that you can just pull them apart. And that's
another example being, and this was kind of his detriment for a while. He's still one of the greatest of all time, but Rafa Nadal. He's a lefty. He's playing a world full of righties, and so he loves the slider out wide to the backhand. And he would just bully people with it over and over and over and over again. But when he was winning Grand Slams, he would pound it 125, 130 into the forehand, up the tee on the ad side or wide on the do side. And it was the fact that he was giving them something different. He was giving them different looks that they weren't used to, especially from him,
right,
in such a high pressure moment where they don't have the time to adjust. I mean, if you can't adjust quick in a tennis match, then you've already lost.
Yeah, I'll tie this back in. So for Spikeball, you'll set up 6 feet from the net. Your serving is 6 feet away, and the receiver is generally going to stand maybe 8.5 feet away from you. So you're talking about tennis in, what is it, 80-foot court? I'm not.
Right around 80, 77.
Okay, and you're on the diagonal. So is it 80 at
it's
that
closer,
diagonal? Okay.
Closer to that.
And for Spikeball, you have about 14 feet, 14 to 17 feet, and this dude's probably going to hit 60.
Yeah.
And the ball's going to hit the net, and it's going to turn, or it's going to go straight.
Yeah.
And you don't know. And you just sit there and you stand there, you got both hands up, and you're sitting here praying that he doesn't hit something that you can't reach, because that's also a possibility, because he could step somewhere that you're not expecting. And I remember watching a stream where they had one of the greatest players of all time from Chico, this legendary Chico Spikeball team, where I think they went 204.
Oh gosh.
They destroyed everyone for 4 years. Just nobody touched them. But now the dude he's not playing anymore. He's retired himself. And he sits here and he commentates sometimes. And he'll be sitting there watching a game, and the dude won't have stood up to line up his serve. He won't have walked up to the line to serve. And he'll sit there and go, he's going to hit a drop. Yeah. And sure enough, he goes up and he steps out and he fakes his big hit, hits a drop, and you see the other guy just 12 feet away from the net. He took his steps back so that he could return the power, and then all of a sudden it's this little drop. And the dude in the commentator, he's been faking it all day. He's been pushing. You sit there and go, I didn't see any of this.
Yeah.
Where was it? I don't know. But just strong understandings of games is
because you get
exciting.
Even if you're not the best at tactical awareness is what I like to call it. I mean, you have a general idea, especially if someone's just bullying the living heck out of you. I mean, for the longest time in high school, I didn't have a backhand, or just the general rule, even if someone has a backhand, is hit into the backhand because their backhand's not their forehand. You know, nine times out of 10, someone's backhand is not going to be as good as their forehand. So if you can put your forehand to their backhand inside out or down the line, you're probably going to win more matches than you lose. That's the idea.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so I would have people absolutely bully my backhand for the longest time until it got good and I started hitting winners off of it. And I would end up taking my backhand into people's forehand, almost playing into, like, I knew what this attack was going to be. I knew what the line of attack was on me. So I just used, again, that proactivity. I know what's coming at me. I have all the time in the world to get set. So I just clobbered it up the line.
It's really awesome because you can sit there and just, you know that they're trying to exploit you in this manner. So if you just
really
fill the
gap,
pour into that exploitation, and you can take it against them. And that's, man, it's awesome where you can sit there and evaluate yourself and have the self-awareness to say,
and grow.
I should grow in this area and just pour myself there.
And it took a while to freaking grow, bro. Because, I mean, up through junior year, I'd say, I mean, my backhand's still weaker than my forehand, but at that point, I did not have a good, reliable backhand. But then senior year kind of flipped it around and probably had one of the better backhands on my team, not the best, but I could hit winners off of it. And it was the best feeling in the world because you expect a winner off the forehand. You know, so some of the different look is just me saying, I'm going to go for it on this shot, and people aren't expecting you to go for it. So they either slow down just a hair or they leave just enough room because they don't think you're going to go for a certain shot, and then you nail it on a dime. So exploit their expectations.
It's got to be a lot of fun there. Just sit there and rip that one shot when they don't see it coming.
It's a game of chess.
Yeah, it really is. I've played minimal tennis. My competency is questionable in that regard, but it's a good time.
But I'm sure it's similar in Spikeball.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We have, I mean, everybody hits to the left, always hit to the left.
Yeah.
Swing for people's left hands if you're serving. If you're playing in a point, you want to hit that backhand winner right through their left. It's a lot of people really pour at your left hand, so it's really tough in that regard because in tennis you generally can actually receive things.
Yeah.
In Spikeball you usually have no chance. Just competency dictates that you will never get a touch on defense. So an offense will rarely be touched. I've played entire games where you don't touch the ball while you play defense just because they're good hitters.
Yeah.
It's finding that one mistake. If they mess up, you have to capitalize. But they don't usually mess up.
Yeah, I can compare that, I guess, to tennis in, having an offensive versus defensive game. Every sport has an analog to that where you're either sitting and carrying or you're just driving the ball really, really quickly. I guess the pace of play is important in that regard. But if you're feeling really good and if you keep hitting winners, then don't slow down, boy.
Oh, absolutely.
You speed up. You don't let the train stop rolling. But especially if you're serving, because you go at the server's pace and you're not feeling as well, then you take every ounce of pace off the ball. Because surprisingly, people, especially at the lower levels of tennis, don't know how to apply pace. They only know how to receive pace. And the more they try to generate their own pace on the ball, the less control they have over it. So
makes sense.
We would kind of have a derogatory term for them called pushers. If you just you have a similar thing?
I'm familiar with the term
Right,
pushers.
you know what a pusher is. So either moonballing and just kind of taking 40-mile-an-hour swings that take forever to get back into the court, or dropping a slice in, taking all the pace off the ball, moving them around. And there's something to be said about the tactical awareness there and saying, if this guy can't hit it, I'm going to keep hitting it, so I'm just going to win an easy match. But it's also been frowned upon as a cheap way to win the match, but win with the least exercised force.
If you're optimizing your strategy to sit there and win the game. Like, if I have a serve that you can't return, guess what I'm going to do every time? I'm going to hit that serve. I mean, I've had a series where that was the case. They couldn't receive one serve. They dominated us in every other facet of the game. Couldn't receive one serve. We won the match. I mean, you can't do something, we're going to pound that thing. Identifying it is hard, but
you see offenses in all different kinds of sports run that same thing. It's for one, your strength and your preference, but when you can find the pressure points. I think about Saquon Barkley a lot, or maybe Todd Gurley, just really great running backs who can find a gap and just freaking shoot it. And if you can't stop Saquon Barkley off the first attempt or the second attempt, they're going to keep giving him the ball.
Right.
Or Leonard Fournette, when he's not freaking injured, he's a mass runner where they just run him and run him and run him to death. And he's going to keep finding little gaps, 5-yard plays. It's not about getting a 20-yard play, but if they can't figure out the 5-yard play, we're going to get 5 yards every single time and get first downs, get drives.
That's how you win. I mean, if you've got something that they don't have an answer to, it's hit it until it doesn't work anymore. I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Keep running. Just keep going with it.
I was reading an opinion piece about Alabama's football team, actually, and it was certainly just an opinion. But from the guy who was writing, his view was that the only problem with Alabama's offense is that they scored too quickly. And not that they run up the clock necessarily, but they don't give their defense enough time to rest, which is why they were starting to get into some of these higher scoring games. They shut out LSU like nobody's business.
Right.
But in games where they would be, 50 points to even in the 20s or 30s, you don't want to allow 30 points in a game.
It's true.
That's not good. But Alabama was just scoring so ridiculously quickly that the defense was still tired and they couldn't get ready back on the field.
That A&M game where first play of the game, touchdown pass, Alabama, 2 minutes later, touchdown, and you're sitting here, we're 8 minutes into the game, and we're down by 21.
Yeah.
And first quarter, the defense isn't going to slow down for them, but I remember putting up points later in that game and bringing it back a little bit, so I can understand what you're saying in that regard.
Yeah, because it's just the pace of play and the speed of play and knowing your guys, and you can always sub people out, especially basketball is really, really big about that, and coaches understanding, okay, who's got to come in, who's got to go out, and, keeping the ball rolling. I think about the 7-second offense from the Rockets. Are you a Rockets fan?
No. I don't know basketball at all. You're going to have to tell me.
Okay.
What's a 7-second offense?
So Mark D'Antoni coined it when he was with the Phoenix Suns, if I'm correct, and my buddy Austin might have to, fight me on that. But then he moved to the Rockets, and he's now, I think, still the head coach for the Rockets. And you've got James Harden, who's a ridiculously talented everything.
Puts it all down. Gets fouled.
And they have good guys also supporting Chris Paul and the like. And the goal of their 7-second offense was legit we're going to put the ball in the net within 7 seconds. And we're going to run this team literally to death so that they don't have time to set up anything. So they better be set up immediately and be able to handle the one play, because we're not going to draw this out. We're not going to try to fake anything. We're just going to almost power through them. And if they can't stop us, they can't stop us.
Who needs the shot clock at this point? They're just going to throw it up.
Exactly, and they can't adjust anything. So you've got James Harden just pulling up threes, and that's how you can put it down to 7 seconds really quickly. But you also have just ridiculous drives where, it's gutsy. You get inside and you throw it up and if they can't get you, they can't get you.
That's interesting. I mean,
that was the only reason,
sense.
Not one of the only reasons, but certainly a main reason that the Spurs have always had trouble with the Rockets in recent years. For one, our roster's kind of going in a different direction. We don't have TD, we don't have Manu anymore.
Right.
The era's just changing. But even while we had the back end of that era, all these old dogs are getting a little bit slower. And you've got young guns on the Rockets and that style of offense being very, very quick. They were scoring so quickly, and we were scoring. Our percentages were almost neck and neck with the Rockets in terms of, shots made versus shots in. But they were able to score in 7-8 seconds, and it would take us 15, 16, 17. And that matters in the long game,
You'll sit there and you'll just have more attempts as the Rockets.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 15-second drive. I mean, sometimes you're going to sit there and go over the shot clock. 7-8 seconds, you don't have to worry about this. You're not going to be as many pressured points in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. It's just, for me, basketball is so tough to watch. I really can't enjoy it. I don't know. It seems.
What's tough about it? Is it too quick or too high scoring?
Like I'll watch it, and maybe 5 or 10 minutes in, I feel like I know what's going to happen. It's just, are they going to pull up a three, or are they going to pass it in and dunk it? I mean, because it feels like the game is very heavily weighted to just dunks and threes. I mean, I never really played basketball at any decent level, so I don't really have a quality understanding of the game.
Yeah.
And it just kind of drags for me.
It certainly had to be explained to me, and I had a lot of people too explain it to me growing up in Spurs Nation. But
I can imagine.
From the outside looking in, especially not having a lot of experience playing, you only see the threes and the dunks or the highlight reel plays.
Right, exactly.
Those are the very memorable plays.
Yeah, that's me. I mean,
And the plays where either you have kind of this jumper that's okay, or plays that feel like they could have been stopped. Almost, I have this thing still where I'm watching basketball take place, and it almost seems like they're letting them score, Like the defense isn't exactly strong, and once they put up the shot, they're not going to foul them. They're not going to do anything. They just kind of let them throw up the shot.
You're just so penalized for attempting to play defense because there's so many fouls.
Right.
The free throws that you're going to be giving up, and it's...
Right. And so
it sometimes makes sense to not pressure the shooter as heavily as you can, and I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, but I think the bulk of the plays that actually happen, or the shots that actually come off the whatever into the basket, are from those in between, not so highlight reel moments, And while they're not celebrated as much, 2 points is 2 points.
Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely needed to win, I suppose. I'm not really the most certain in this regard. I don't know what percentages or what stats look like for basketball.
Well, there's certainly a trend, and you're right, in particular with threes, because Steph Curry has legitimately changed the game statistically in terms of shots taken from outside three-point range. They look at his highlight reels, and kids coming up are not being trained, but wanting to learn how to be Steph Curry as opposed to how to be Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan didn't shoot threes. I mean, LeBron's three is good, but he's a big dog. He's going to drive through the court and dunk it, like you said. But you've got Steph Curry, who's, 6'2", but just pulls up from, 40, 50 feet, and drains it like nobody's business. All these kids watching him suddenly have hope in their, not bad genetics, but unlikely genetics to be this 6'5" monster. I'm going to shoot threes now. You got kids in 6th grade trying to be Steph Curry as opposed to Michael Jordan. Long story short, there's been a statistical difference in terms of the number of threes taken across the NBA since Steph Curry has entered the league.
Yeah. Going back to your point about kids wanting to be Steph Curry, I think you see a very awkward disconnect because, like in baseball, you have a much, much larger amount of people that are actually going to play the game.
Yeah.
As opposed to basketball where you have the NBA, the D-League, some European leagues.
Yeah.
I mean, if you count it all up, each team has 12 players in the roster? How many is it? 9?
I think it's 15.
Okay, 15 players.
Maybe.
And then you have...
I could be wrong on that. I could be so wrong. Yeah.
I think it was...
But certainly not a 40-man roster.
Yeah,
certainly
and you don't
not.
have 40, and then you don't have, the Astros have the MLB Astros. They have the AAA team, the AA team, the high A team, the A team, the low A team, the rookie ball team, the instructional ball team, and the Dominican team. We got 9 teams of 40 people. There's 360 people just here. And then there's, 5 independent leagues. And then you have 30 teams, 30 organizations of this. And then you have a Japanese league with the same structure. And then you have a Korean league. And then every university has a program. And I feel like there's just a lot more opportunity for players within this sport. And I don't want to, come out like against basketball or anything, but
For
I
sure.
feel like a lot of youths really have this idea that I'm gonna be
Oh, for
Steph.
sure.
I'm gonna be the one that
Because it's
makes
much
it.
more glamorous than baseball.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
It's much more glamorous.
think about LeBron. LeBron is, one of the best players ever.
Probably the best.
Likely,
arguably.
yes,
Yeah.
indeed. He for sure has a strong case as the best player.
Yeah.
I'm not knowledgeable enough to argue that with you,
yeah.
but he's awesome. And you see all the money, all the fame that he gets.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes anywhere, that team is a contender. He
Yeah.
he plays for Cleveland, they're going to win. They might not win it all, but they're going to win
Right.
games. He goes to the Heat, they win games. He goes to LA, they've
Yeah,
struggled a little
they're
bit.
struggling,
but
yeah.
they are a lot better with LeBron. As opposed to Mike Trout. Mike
Right.
Trout is going to be the best player ever.
Yeah.
Like, statistically, nobody has ever done what he's done, and he's 26.
He's incredible.
He's going to be the best player ever.
And he's such a nice guy.
And you gotta love him. He plays the game the right way.
Yeah.
Probably one of my top 5 players right now.
Yeah.
But Trout plays for the Angels.
Mm-hmm.
They suck. The Angels are not good, and they have the best player in the history of the game and other good players on their team. You have to have this massive team. You have to have this massive structure. It's
see what
not
you're
as
saying.
glamorous, and it doesn't really draw a lot of people to it. And you have this awkwardness of basketball where everybody is drawn to it. And everybody wants to be that
Yeah.
guy, and there's no spot for you. There's not a spot for you to be close. Like if you are, the 1500th best basketball player in the world, you don't have a job. If you are the 1500th best baseball player in the world, not only do you have a job, you have a good job. You're making a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So
Doing what you love.
doing what you love, as opposed to these basketball players where they just have there's nothing. There's
Yeah.
nothing there.
Club leagues or
I mean,
in the community center.
yeah, right? Like you're
When
playing
there's
rec
semi-pro ball.
there is semi-pro ball, but to the same degree that baseball exists, it's not there. You go down to a single A baseball game and
Yeah. It's a
and
family
and
event,
court
bro.
workers. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There's people there. There's money. You can make a living and you can actually play the game you love. And I really, really like that about like sports like baseball or sports like football, where you have these massive infrastructures behind it, or hockey, where you just have there's like 100 different hockey leagues out there, with tons of teams. Like there's much larger teams, and I feel like it's kind of sad that basketball takes sometimes a central light where it pulls a lot of people that really pour their hearts into the game, and there's just nothing there.
That's interesting.
It's-
That's a take I haven't really heard before, because I certainly had that picture in my mind, but I think it was more with a broad brush over all of professional sports in terms of, it's 0.001% of
Yeah.
whatever, kid even goes and plays college
Right.
ball is going to play professional ball.
Yeah, you just see it in baseball. There's so many opportunities for people to get their education through college, that they can sit here and they can play the game, they can get scholarships, and there's a lot more room for scholarships in baseball and football that it's really beneficial. And I don't know that basketball is that same.
I think it's also a regional thing as well, because
That's
I
fair.
know up northeast where you've got the Syracuse or Duke
Yeah.
or Michigan, there's
That's-
certainly a lot of programs and a lot of culture surrounding basketball. Whereas down here in Texas, we have the Rockets, we have the Spurs, we have the Mavericks.
We don't want to talk about that yet.
We don't want to talk about the Mavericks right now, but much love. But there's certainly not the same degree of basketball culture in Texas as there is football, especially,
very good
and
point.
baseball. So I think
Yeah.
it's also a regional thing where,
That's true.
you
Yeah.
think about colleges, where colleges are going to have money poured into certain programs. It's where the sport is popular. And
I agree with you, and I really think that the main portion of athletics should not be focused towards that professional level, really playing at the highest level,
Yeah.
and trying to make it rich, or because it's not going to be you. Just as the general
Statistically,
statement,
yeah.
it's not. You're not probably the one, and if you are the one, you know it, and the people around you will tell you that clearly you are. And I think that a lot of it is mainly focused on learning life lessons, because that's really where you grow in sports. You run around, you are healthy, you produce more. You're going to be a much more driven person. You understand how to improve your life, improve yourself.
how to compete with a certain code of ethics that allows you to be a team player, not only, team versus team, but as a business, as a corporation, as an organization, as a community. Not everything is a competition, but the things you learn through competition like kind of disseminate into the rest of life, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that I was very, very lucky to have a baseball coach in high school that he loved the phrase, sports isn't life, but life is sports. And what this was sports isn't going to be your life. You're not going to be a professional, but the lessons you'll learn playing with this team, playing with these people, the connections that you'll make, that you'll be able to operate in a team, these skills that you've learned for learning, how to play the game or how to improve yourself and how to conduct yourself when you're on the field. That's what life is. That's what you should be focusing on, becoming a better person and improving yourself. I mean, we see it in sports, and it really applies to our livelihood. And that statement has really stuck with me as a person, to sit there and say, man, I am not going to be this Mr. Athlete where I play pro and I'm going to be everything taken care of for the rest of my life with my $500 million Bryce Harper contract. Like, it's not going to be me, but I can take these skills that I'm learning here and apply them inwardly to everything, to school, to faith, to my body physically. Like what I need to improve, I know how to set a game plan for myself and just say, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to focus on these things, I need to associate with these people, and I need to work in this manner with these ethics so that I can put myself together as a well-rounded person and really form myself. And that's not going to be just around sports, but it's going to be around whatever goals I may have professionally, family-wise. I think that's the main value of American sports, or just sports in general. I think that's where we should be looking.
And it's incredibly biblical as well. Not that there's just soccer matches going around left and right in the New Testament and the Old, but you have Paul in particular making all of these comparisons that you've probably heard in every FCA meeting ever convened in terms of, all runners run, but not all obtain the prize. And so pursue Christ in the same manner that you would pursue, a race, like as Olympic athletes. People in the New Testament were very familiar with the analogies that Paul was using, which is incredible because it's strange how we have not deviated from that course in 2,000 plus years. We love to not only be entertained, but to pursue greatness, to pursue perfection, to pursue that through competition and healthy competition. I mean, you've got the gladiatorial games where
but
it's life or death.
At the same time, you have the Olympics. 300 BC, they're all coming together. They're putting their wars on halt so that they can play in the games. And we've got the same thing today. And it just really shows you how applicable human nature, or how human nature hasn't changed, and how applicable Scripture was then. I mean, Paul's message 2,000 years ago still rings true today, and we can take it as hard as athletes and apply it to ourselves. And this is really a beautiful thing that we can sit here and have that discussion based around Paul's message. It's because of
good.
Athletics.
Yeah, it's good. And I know you were talking earlier about just statistically how you talk about professional athletes and these kids wanting to grow up and be the next LeBron James, the next Steph Curry, the next Mike Trout, or anybody else. But the statistical likelihood of that happening is 0.00001. Always possible, and you don't want to just knock down kids' dreams for the sake of being, a cynic or anything like that. But in particular, I mean, you are very, very close, my friend. You are incredibly close within your own field to having a shot at doing what you love. Professionally.
I mean, there's a couple guys out there right now that have made it the full-time profession. But I think we're a little bit of money short within the field. There's not the big sponsors. There's no Nike sponsorship out there like there is for Tiger. He just gets good at golf. But I don't really think that necessarily matters for me in the long run. I think that the real benefit that I gain is not monetary from playing. I think the real benefit that I gain is the gain that every high schooler, every college athlete, every pro athlete gains, and that's the ability to learn how to work with people, the ability to improve myself, and then the community that I make around it. Because I have absolutely adored traveling around and meeting people. It's been the highlight of the community. As much as I love the tournaments and participating in the sport, even better has been the community surrounding it, because I sit there and I chat with my friends from California and my friends from Michigan, and you sit there and you're like, wow, I have met all of these great people, all these competent, interesting individuals around the country
Yeah.
from just a little yellow ball and a 3-foot net.
It's crazy what can bring people together.
It really is.
And I think, ironically, it's because Spikeball is still a growing sport, and it's a bit of a niche sport in that way. So in order to get a certain level of competition, you've got to drag people in from California and from Florida.
It's very true.
Whereas my experience with tennis has been there's such an amazing demographic here in Texas. Florida, California, and maybe Maryland are probably the biggest 4 U.S. hubs of tennis in terms of developing players, especially young players. We have a bunch of academies that are awesome here in Texas as well as Florida and the other places mentioned. But because of that, we always were so local. It'd be tournaments in Dallas, tournaments in Austin, tournaments in Waco or Houston or Katy. And I still had that same experience that you were talking about in terms of the community, because within your level, whether you're a champ or a super champ, and even levels within super champs, whether you're A draw or B draw, you start seeing the same people over and over and over again. And it's in your best interest to make friends with them, because there's nothing worse than being a player who's a very, very good player, but spends 3 or 4 years within the same division and becomes very, very unpopular in the unspoken locker room. That when somebody else sees your name on the draw or on the bracket, they just kind of shake their head or wag their head thinking this isn't going to be a fun match. I'm not going to enjoy this match because this person is either not a good sport, is known for cheating, known for hooking, or it's in your best interest to make friends.
I can even take it even smaller.
Yeah.
I initially brought it up being like a national thing in Spikeball. And I get to go to these tournaments, and it's like this great reunion every time we have an event. But we can take it smaller with tennis, and then again even smaller. I coach chess for all this time, and you see the kids within Houston. They all sit there and they go to the tournaments around Houston. Small geographic area, not minuscule, but small.
Right.
And they know who everybody is. They know who all the people in their own level are. Mm-hmm. He's 8. He knows all the other kids that are 8 to 10 years old that are about his same level, and he's sitting there coming to this tournament. Oh, I learned this new opening. I've been working on this new strategy, and I'm going to play this way, and I think I'm going to win this one. Mm-hmm. And I can take it even smaller. I work at a bowling alley over the summer, and it's a great experience because inside that bowling alley we have a community. And there's 32 lanes, and every single Monday, 5 people get on each lane, and they all bowl against each other, and you come back next Monday, and it's the same people. They all switch lanes, and they all do it again. Mm-hmm. And the community within there is tight-knit. They all know each other. They all know who's who. They all know who's having a great time, who's having a good game, who's struggling. And I sit there, and I'm just watching this, like, what a community that these people have. You go on Facebook, you sit there, he posts his score. Oh, what a great job he did. Congratulations on this, that, or the other. Your first 300, what a great night for you. Everybody's there to shake your hand, to give a round of applause, buy you a drink, whatever. Everybody is supportive and there. Yeah. And whether it's national, whether it's international, like the Olympians, or whether it's within the city or your one home center. This is one building. 10,000 square feet. We have this community, and it still exists. Yeah. So it's everywhere. It's all athletics. As we said previously, sports isn't life, but life is sports.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's interesting how, sports can kind of become life, and the tricky waters that approach when we start to deviate from, I guess, God's will for our lives, keeping him center place as opposed to, sports, vocation, whatever your extracurricular activities. It could be chess, bowling, tennis, basketball, spikeball. There's a lot of challenges that come with just managing in your own heart, where are my priorities? What's going to take center stage in my life? Am I going to, play this game to the glory of God and figure out how to do that? Or am I going to play this game for me? Has that wrestling kind of come up recently for you? Has it been a thing in the past? Or
For sure. It's very awkward within Spikeball because there's 2 distinct halves. And you have a lot of these West Coast guys that are very chill.
Gotcha.
Very surfer dude-esque, always showing up for events and not necessarily all there.
Right.
But on the other half, you have a strong, and I mean very strong, very passionately strong Christian community.
Okay.
The group that gets together and prays before the event. Yeah. It's awesome to see within the game all these people glorifying God. Even yesterday at this event, the team that won, prior to the event, they lead the group in prayer. I mean, they
awesome.
open the event in prayer. They give the gospel message before we get started, and it resonates with you that you're not just playing the game.
Yeah.
You're playing the game for God. You're really doing this for His glory, and you want to glorify Him. You don't want to play unethically. You don't want to play unsportsmanlike. You want to really play the game the right way and not try to put others down, but to lift everyone up. And it can be frustrating. I mean, you can have games where you really dislike these other people, and then at the end of it, you sit there and have to come together and embrace as Christians and really have a bigger scope to make it not the biggest thing to have lost, but to connect with them as people is the more important aspect. I mean, putting your relationship with them and then your understanding of the scope of this game under Christ is just a glorification of Him. The fact that we can play is huge, but I mean, simultaneously, as me as a sinner, this is an extremely difficult thing to put there.
I think that was the biggest struggle for me. My high school experience especially was so dictated by my idolization of tennis and where I thought I was within my own team, because I certainly wasn't the highest rung on the ladder by any means. During any of my years, even as a senior, I probably started twice, in the fall, which was still an amazing experience, and my coach was very gracious to offer me those opportunities. But I knew where I was, but I was never fully content with where I was. I was always convinced that if I worked a little bit harder, if I outworked all my friends who were also on the team, that I might have deserved a higher spot on the team. That was always kind of my twisted fantasy, that I could kind of work my way into excellence or into greatness, when really it was always, faith and works. You can't, be faithful and not be working hard. You can't be faithful to your calling as a tennis player, as a spikeball player, or as an athlete in general, and not put practice and due diligence into what you do. So there's certainly an aspect of I'm going to work hard at what I do, and that's part of glorifying the Lord, is showing commitment. But you also want to be able to balance that commitment with, your relationship with Christ, and truly letting that personal relationship overwhelm and kind of consume everything else, to where you can't help but encourage your teammates on a doubles court or on a spikeball field. I guess it's a field.
We don't really have a name. A realm is
realm.
I mean, the understanding your vocation as, in this scope, an athlete. In this time, you're performing this vocational job, per se, as being an athlete, not only for yourself, but to glorify God. And then to sit there and take that somewhere else and say, I'm now vocationally a student, I'm vocationally a son, and have these varying responsibilities that all tie in and are all very important to me in my relationship and my understanding of what I should be doing with my life and how I should be glorifying God.
That's so good and so big. And I know it seems so much harder, especially now coaching, to kind of see the same thing that I experienced be experienced by so many other players, and so many other players that, while it might not be a prideful identity in their sport, it might be an identity in their failure within the sport, where if they lose a match, they begin to identify with that loss, or they begin to identify with even a bad shot within the moment, and start to have, outbursts or these responses that aren't going to be helpful to them in the long run, and they're certainly not honoring to their opponent, honoring to the Lord. And it's very hard to intervene in those situations, because I don't have the moral high ground in past experience. I can only speak from that, disenchantment and disillusionment that I shared with them in the past, and say, look, this is not going to get you where you want to go, because I know you don't want to be here. I know you want to be filled with joy, with happiness, and with the peace, knowing that you are loved and accepted. And throwing your racket or yelling across the court or across the net is not going to get you there. It might give you satisfaction in the moment, this sort of vengeance in a way, or feeling justified if you got a bad call or a bad shot hit on you, then you let off the steam. But in the long run, that's just not glorifying to the Lord. That's not good sportsmanship. I think even from a secular perspective, people kind of understand that there's there's fair play, bro.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
There's fair play. And if people who don't know God can understand that, then I think all the more we should understand that we need to respect them and honor them as fellow children of God. And that's, yeah.
Yeah, coming from chess, you have the awkwardness of not seeing the event.
Okay.
So when I go and I coach at an event and my students play, they go off into another room. I don't know what's going on. I can't see their game. I don't know how they're reacting. And they come to me after the game, and they'll show it to me on paper, and we'll go over the game post fact. But I can't know, and so I don't really know how I personally would intervene. You have this opportunity where you see it happening, and you can. I don't know. Are you allowed to call a timeout or?
So the way it traditionally works. It's even different between public and private school. So I played public school, but I coach private school. And so the rules governing whether or not I'm even allowed on the court, I'm not allowed on the court as a coach.
Gotcha.
They have to come to me at the fence and ask me during a changeover for advice or tips or strategic whatever. And a lot of times I'll kind of call them over to the fence. That's what most people do, just to kind of get around the rule, so to speak. And I'll kind of have my 2 cents that I want to share with them over the changeover. And it's always an issue of priorities for me, because I could say, hey, calm down, or hey, don't do that. Or I could say, hey, let's refocus, work on that backhand, work on that forehand, because which one of those statements is going to help them, for one, win the match, and two, keep me in good standing with them. And that sounds like a really selfish thing to say, but I don't want them thinking, why did coach just call me out while they're trying to play a match?
It's very important though, because obviously this relationship between a coach and the player is huge for them to sit there and respect you, to listen to you, to gain your knowledge. I really understand the struggle in this situation, because there's not really a right answer necessarily at each time. You're sitting there balancing this line of where do we go? Because obviously this relationship is really fluid. It's a very dynamic relationship where we don't necessarily feel, or we haven't noticed all the things that they've noticed. I could have said something previously that they're still latched onto, and I don't know about that. So it can be a scary moment, and you really have to work on just understanding what you are doing with them, because it's really not like you think about it in terms of talking to them. I can say this to them, I can say this to them, and as you say that to them, you're experiencing with them. It's a joint journey that you experience together, and it's so tough to sit there and try to guide somebody down that. I know that you're kind of afraid. It seems somewhat afraid to take them down the road that you went. Yeah. So it's
interesting, and it's really tough, because I've also watched a lot of other coaches. I love watching my coach me and coach other people, and see how he did things, and kind of recollecting on that, how I like to be coached a lot more directly, not necessarily abruptly. I wanted him to talk through things with me, but I also wanted him to be honest with me. And there were a couple of times, his name was Robert, where he would say, hey, I know what you're capable of, and this is not it. And so that was really hard to take in. It hurts. And those first couple of minutes after he said that, it was that was very, very tough to take in. But I loved him and respected him so much, and I trusted him enough to let it sink in, and to say, wait, he wouldn't say this to hurt me. He would say this to get me back on track. And, thankfully, kind of the Lord gave me enough headspace to realize, okay, this is what I got to do. I got to fix myself. But I also know that might not be the case for everybody, especially given the fact that I'm not always great with my words. Sometimes I'll say things without thinking them through all the way.
Yes. Oh, I know. Don't worry. As a very competitive, strong-minded, sometimes too headstrong athlete, I'll sit there and not want it. I vividly remember coaches coming out to the mound while I'm pitching, and sitting here going, "What are you doing? You're just, whatever you want in baseball." I remember one time we were playing. I think it was a JV game.
Okay.
And I was a freshman. And I was pitching some random JV game, and really just not throwing strikes, trying to do too much with the ball, and trying to do too much. Really strike everyone out, not just let them hit it and make plays. And he came out to the mound, just looked at me and said, whatever you want from this game, you're going to have it. If you want to strike everyone out, that's going to happen. It might take a while. We can be out here all day. I mean, if you want that, go for it. But whatever you want to happen here, that's what's going to happen. You can throw it down the middle. You can let him hit it. We'll get some outs. Be done here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Or you can drag this out and try to. And it hits so hard because I'm sitting here. My entire game is focused on just be the man. Do it all. And you sit there and
very selfish play.
Oh, absolutely. And I was 100%. Especially as a pitcher, it was I'm on the mound. I'm the one in the middle of the field. Like, this is my time. And in the moment, I very much regret it. Looking back, I kept at it and struck out the side. Here, 8 batters later, after 4 runs are on the board, and like hindsight is 0. I was just so disappointed. Like, why did I do that to myself? But it's definitely a learning experience. Yeah. I don't know if I'm satisfied that I took that road or not. So it's an awkward struggle as an athlete.
And it's something you definitely have to work through, and that definitely takes time, because I don't think having coached and having received coaching, mentally,
right,
in terms of my own pride and selfishness while competing, that's something that takes years to get rid of. You know, and you'll always have kind of, off moments where the switch flips the wrong way and you make a stupid shot that you shouldn't have made. But there's a difference between a bad shot selection and consistently selfish shot selection, and trying to either strike people out all the time, like you said, or for me, it was always the serve and the forehand, trying to win too quickly and trying to say, I want to win this point off of a winner, as opposed to letting this other guy miss, because tennis, especially at the level I was playing, is a game of errors, and you've got to let people swing and miss, you know?
It's a very humbling experience looking back, to sit there and acknowledge, hey, I've made a poor decision. I don't want to make that again. Sit there and go forward in life and try to be more accepting. And for the next couple of years, I didn't really think about it. It didn't really affect me in the same way that it had. Right after senior year, I really started to look inward and think about it. A lot of change went through me in that regard, to look inward and evaluate what I did and how I carried myself and what I should be looking for in sports. It was very different outlook now as opposed to then. That's been interesting.
Yeah, that's been the same thing for me too, and I think a lot of it just has to do with coming into college and realizing, you know what, this is not my identity in the slightest, and that was a big pill to swallow for me my freshman year coming into college, because my thought was, okay, I'm going to, play on the club team, and I'm going to make friends with all these guys and girls, and we're going to go around and do these state and national tournaments, and it's going to be awesome, and I'm going to be great. But I just wasn't enthralled with it anymore. I didn't like having to meet new people. I didn't like having to make friends all over again and kind of convince them that I was a worthy hitting partner in a way. I was done playing that game. I was done trying to play for myself in a way, so I just kind of stopped playing, because I realized I couldn't play for myself. It just wasn't sustainable. And I had a bunch of other things that I needed to do, like schoolwork. Studying in college was studying in college is much different than studying in high school, as in it exists in college.
But for sure. That transition, from my perspective, for you, is very awkward, because I met you last year as a freshman. I was. And I did not know you played tennis until here a couple weeks back. I hadn't known, and it's an interesting thought that you identified as the tennis player. And
a tennis player. Certainly wasn't the tennis player.
Right. I say the tennis player because I know for myself I was the baseball player. In the group.
For sure.
And taking a step back from that, it's I was a baseball player. It was fun. I had a great time. That's
something you did, not something you were.
It's not, as opposed to right now. You introduced this discussion as as Fredric plays Spikeball and such, and I, to some degree, I have this in my closet where it's one of the many hobbies I have.
Right.
I'm just another guy. I like to go play sports. Spikeball is one of them. It's a lot of fun, but I don't want to be identifying myself as
Yeah.
the Spikeball guy, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I may come off as, I'm sure I do to many, but...
What do you want to be identified as? I know that's a trick question, but...
Wow. I mean, it could be a trick question, but it's just such a... It has so much depth to it.
Yeah.
When I think about it, because what I want to be identified as would be, I mean, a husband,
Yeah.
a father, a competent individual, just somebody that goes to work, gets their job done, is productive, goes home, goes to church. I just want to be, that guy, just another person in the crowd that does his job every day and goes home to his family. I mean, that's my aspiration. That is my biggest goal in life, to be a face in the crowd, goes home, does his own thing, has his own life with his own family, and that would be huge. That is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I think that's definitely more humble than my aspiration still, because I tend to still be in this phase where I'm thinking about being exceptional in a lot of ways. And I think sports, tennis in particular, has driven home that need or that desire to be great, maybe not necessarily the greatest, but to achieve greatness in general.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just can't bite that bug,
I think that for me, a huge part of this was looking to my parents, to my family, because, I mean, my family has what they want. They have each other, they have their 2 kids, they have church every Sunday, and we're a family, and it's the goal. I mean, everything that I've seen from my own upbringing has been my goal. It's what I want. The exceptionalness is not outward. The exceptionalness is not me doing something awesome that everybody can see me do. The exceptional part is my parents were awesome to me. I want to be that awesome to my family, to my spouse, to my kids one day. That goal is so much more exceptional than anything else I could do outside of it. Because I'm not going to win 4 U.S. Open titles, and it's not me. I can't do it, and even if I did do it, I would still need to be a father. Yeah. And I would have to do that super well. Otherwise, I would be making a huge mistake with my life. And I think that, sadly, in our world, a lot of people don't want that. Yeah. And I think that it's so much more important than a lot of people give their time to think about it. I think that if we perceive how much time we spend on focusing on this, that, or the other, as opposed to being a husband or being a father, if we were to spend just as much time focused on those things, we'd probably wind up with a lot more quality individuals. And what better can you be than, a quality individual?
I think that's definitely true in a lot of ways, because times are changing, and it's not like I can go back in time and see how things were and how they compare to now. But just with my best guess, there's so much more independence on both sides of your parents. Your mom and your dad can both work full-time jobs. They can both have a vocation that rests primarily outside of the home, at least in terms of time commitment, and then come back home. And if that quality time is not sought after, if that quality time isn't there between husband and wife, between the parents and the children, then it can very easily and very quickly fall away. It's certainly a snowball effect where you come home late a couple of nights, then come home late a couple of weeks, where you just don't see your kids. I had my mom is still amazing, but one of the biggest struggles for me was when she took a job in Puerto Rico my freshman year, and I could not fathom why in the world she would even entertain the possibility of leaving us, because she was in the home, not necessarily a home mom. She taught, she substituted at elementary school, she taught at university, but she was always home in time to take care of us, and I thought that's what her job was, and I thought that was her only job, really, or probably her most important job. And then when she decided to take a position that was away from that, I immediately went into judgment mode, and I immediately went into this phase where I not only didn't want to talk to her, but I adamantly wanted to fight her at any given moment. I kept a lot of that inside of me for a while, because I had this conflicting voice in my head that said honor your father and mother, so I kept that bitterness in my chest, didn't always speak my mind, but I remember having this resentment that I despised because she just wasn't there. And it wasn't that she was trying to abandon us. It wasn't that she was trying to, completely throw the family behind her. She loved us, and she still absolutely loves us with all of her heart. But I couldn't see that because I couldn't see her. And as much as we have FaceTime and as much as we have phones and everything, and it's not the same. Quality time is my love language, bro. And I mean, quality time in physical space, it's different.
It's such an awkward situation for us.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 21. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I'm 21. You're 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are still learning how to cope with these experiences. I mean, as youth, we don't have 40 years of experience, 50 years of experience to sit there and say, what is that person thinking?
Yeah.
I know what I'm thinking. I know how I'm feeling. I know my thought process. But what is theirs?
Yeah.
What are they trying to get out of it? What does this mean for them and their relationship with Christ as well? I have mine. They have theirs. What are we thinking? What is the decision-making process? And it's so hard for myself as a youth to sit there and put myself onto others. Mm-hmm. And I know that personally I used to have no concept of it. I didn't give any thought to it at all, and it scares me looking back to the point where I always want to consider it before I start, going after things. But it's, as a youth, I'm still headstrong and not necessarily thinking things out in the moment. So making that discernment has been an interesting change in my life as I've gotten older.
Mm-hmm. And I think empathy has so much to do with that, and that empathy comes in no small part with communication. And I mean, what could be worse than a child not understanding why his mom is leaving or his dad is at work all the time than not talking to them? Because if there's never a conversation either before, during, and after, hopefully all three, about what the plan is, what the heart behind the plan is, and how things are going to work in the process of everything, then there's just going to be a lot of miscommunication. There's going to be a lot of, heartbreak and brokenness that can come about because we weren't on the same page. And it wasn't that, again, we were trying to hate on each other, trying to be a broken family. Nobody was trying to break the family apart actively. But because we didn't know how to communicate with one another, we didn't know how to empathize with one another. And we're still certainly working on that because it's a process of being, a developing human being is learning how to listen to the Spirit as opposed to your gut. And sometimes I hear those used synonymously, but I think the Spirit will definitely tell you the better way in terms of
most certainly
countering prejudice and countering, every judgment you might have on somebody because they do this or that. Like, run that by God, run that through prayer, and see what else comes to your brain. Take a couple of seconds to think about it and understand, and ask people who are involved in whatever that situation is, what is going on with them, It's big.
I think that I just said that a lot of that was sin, or a lot of that was youthfulness, and I think that I'm equating that kind of with sin, not knowing how to cope with my own sinfulness, and what I'm thinking of is not necessarily where the Spirit would lead me, as it's just my sinfulness speaking, me not having a strong enough understanding of what God is doing in my life and where He wants to take me, and what my life should look like. So for me to be putting myself onto others is just fruitless endeavor led by me through sin.
And I think a lot of that comes back to talking and finding community, finding a way to have these discussions about what's going on, not necessarily even gossiping, but seeking wise counsel from pastors, from your parents, going directly to the people who you might have an issue with and saying, hey, what's going on here? And being bold enough to ask questions and ask for clarity, but also being humble enough to do that in a way that is not antagonistic to them or that is not prejudging them in any way, but really is seeking truth rather than status or pride or, justice on your part. And I know for me, going back to youth group was the step that needed to be taken for me to realize, hey, I've got some issues that I need to work through with my family. I had people who were bold enough and wise enough to speak into me in that regard and say, you've got to have a talk with your mom. You've got to have a talk with your little brother. You've got to have a talk with, your friends even. You've got to have a lot of talks with God and figure out who you are as opposed to who you think you are.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I know you have a lot to say about growing up in the church and just how it's interesting because most people would kind of prejudge young people as especially contemporary and especially novel, and thinking that everything we like has to be new and innovative and full of glamour and splendor. But you tend to take a nostalgic approach, I guess is how I would characterize it, and you really have a passion for the traditional, I guess, way of doing things. And I was hoping you could expound on that a little bit.
So I'll start by addressing you mentioned you returned to youth group, and I'm kind of that kid that was always there at church.
Yeah.
So from baptism, 5 weeks later, 5 weeks out of the womb, getting baptized, to today, I mean, almost every Sunday, I'm there. It's been just, I don't know how to say it, picturesque. What I view as myself looking outward of saying, this is what I want my kids to do. This is what I think should be the thing. In fact, I would prefer them to do it more diligently than I personally have. But I think that for me, growing up in the church has made that the case.
Okay.
That sentiment of what the liturgy is has become ingrained in me through all these years and has been so comforting to me when I have had times of trouble.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll say is I went to Higher Things in 8th grade, immediately following confirmation. Higher Things was huge for me. Higher Things really showed me.
Is that a conference? Or?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me.
No, yeah.
The Higher Things conference
yeah.
is a high school or post-confirmation youth conference. They're held throughout America. They hold 3 or 4 of them each year. And they really get some of the superstars, speakers of the synod to come out and just preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And obviously throughout Sunday school as a kid, you learn all about all the stories and all about the niceties of the Bible or the not so niceties of the Bible.
Yeah.
But you learn all the stories and all the miracles that happen. And all these texts, all these scripture, you can reference them as a high schooler.
Right.
You know the stories. And in middle school, you go to confirmation where you learn the doctrine. You start to learn about the faith.
Fill in the blank here.
Exactly. Fill in the blank. Understand not just what happened, but why it happened, how it happened, what it means.
Yeah.
And Higher Things went another level down and said, all right.
What does this mean for you?
What does this mean for you? Where does it come from? And how does where does it come from affect you?
Okay.
So the first one I went to was a Christmas theme. And
nice.
They had Christmas. So the first day we got there, and it was the last Advent week.
Okay.
And that was at the beginning of the week. At the end of the week of, the event, we had another service, and that service was Christmas celebration.
Right.
And so throughout the week, we would go to services, and we would learn all about what this week of Christmas celebration, what this portion of the church year is all about.
Yeah.
And I started to really attach to the history behind the church in Christmas.
Okay.
What these traditions actually mean, where these words, why we use certain portions of the liturgy in the Christmas season and not others. And then the next year I go back and we learn about Holy Week. And it starts Palm Sunday. And it ends. He is risen.
Yeah.
And it's this fantastic week of learning all about it. And we had... the following year was called Te Deum, and we learned all about the intricacies of the liturgy. And through that, I completely attached to it. All of these songs and all of these hymns that I've been singing for the past 15 years that I already love, that I already can sing by heart, now have more meaning to them. They have depth to them. And whenever I've sat there from that point, it's always been... not necessarily my first place to go is the scriptures, but the first place for me to go has been the hymns. I can always think to the hymns that I know so well that really sit with me and rest with me and encourage myself through.
Yeah.
So many hymns. I mean, Jesus Christ has risen today. It's just sit there and you remember that you're saved, and you also have, I mean, thy strong word to guide you along, and all the hymns that I know and love. Savior, like a shepherd, lead us to lead me and push me in the right direction, to keep me in check with myself.
And I think that's so incredibly good, and mainly because it comes from such a personal experience. And I'd be willing to bet, and I don't think you would fight me on this, that had you not grown up in a very traditional church, it would be just the manner that you'd grown up would be what you're comfortable with.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And so, like, if you grow up in a more traditional church, you're more comfortable with the traditional church. If you grow up in a more contemporary church, it's what you're used to. That was the case with me, where it was kind of mixed. And I tend to lean more contemporary even now, partially because so much of my, I guess, reclamation of my own faith has been around, here in College Station, we've got Breakaway, we've got amazing contemporary speakers and worship and stuff like that, stuff that I've grown personally attached to. But it's that personal attachment to Christ, and the style is just a means of getting you there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that the only danger comes when we become so personally attached to the style as opposed to the person that the style is talking about,
Yes.
So it's not that there's ever something wrong with contemporary or traditional stuff in of itself as a style. Right. But it's that content of the style does not reflect the person of Jesus Christ. And if we can't have a personal relationship with him through the style, or through the content rather, then that's when the things become dangerous.
I tend to agree with you, and I'll add one or two things. The first thing is, I think that a beauty of the liturgy and a value here that you may not get. I don't know you well enough to put this on you, but I know that something that I get out of it is I can really relate to a lot of the older generations within my church, because they also grew up in the liturgy. They have these similar sentiments to songs. So, for example, I vividly remember singing. And we sang this song actually last week here. It was, I'm drawing a blank. It was a call to proclamation of the gospel proclamation. We sang it in church last week, and I vividly remembered being maybe 5 or 6 and singing it with Uwe. So for me, growing up in my church, Uwe was the old German man that sat in the 5th pew on the right side every week. And sometimes you'd sit around Uwe, and he loved to sing. So for me, growing up, I vividly remember singing with Uwe. And I don't know if I would have that same connection to previous generations. And Uwe is one example of many. But I wouldn't have that same connection without the liturgy, without being able to sit there and sing with him together, something that he, as a boy, remembers singing with his parents, even in a different country, in a different language, the same song, the same notes.
It's absolutely incredible, really, because I've never heard it talked about from that perspective. For one, just the personal experience, but in terms of younger generations being able to connect with older generations, and really with the past and the tradition and the history of the church and the hymns, because that's a big part that, especially within the synod, people love to preach the glory, not the glory, but just the value of tradition and how it connects us not only with each other here and now, but also with, people who have gone before us, the other people in the church who have gotten us to where we are today, which is interesting. And you're right that I definitely see a lack in maybe the genre of contemporary Christian music, where there's not a large-scale attempt to connect with older generations.
I won't say that this is a fault of contemporary. I only say this as an observation that contemporary is, by definition, contemporary. It's new. And I think that if you can, if there is a way for, you to connect with your parents or the people around you, your family, that is the real goal of this. You can learn the gospel, you can learn the sentiments of Christ that we're trying to understand, his majesty, all of it through contemporary. I know it's there. I've heard the hymns. There are many contemporary songs that are quality that I personally enjoy. And if you can have that as well, I highly encourage you, run with it.
Yeah.
Go for it. I mean, even if you don't have it, if it means something to you and if you are gaining the same value, the same understanding, it's completely legitimate. It's so valuable to just have it. However you are comfortable having it, have that. And it's so fantastic that, I mean, you and I can sit here and I love my liturgy. And
I love my Jesus rap.
Exactly. I mean, they're both legitimately a way for us to connect and understand the Spirit, and that's the real goal here.
Yeah, because it's so interesting again how it's not about connecting to the style; it's about connecting to the person. And I think most people, when you genuinely talk to them, they understand that, and they know that while I have my preference, I could probably find a hymn and some, CHH song that are talking on exactly the same points in a different way.
Oh, most certainly.
And it's about connecting to different generations. You kind of have the culture of the times certainly influencing contemporary music. And I would say that most every traditional song has started off contemporary.
Oh, most certainly, yeah.
That's how
you can
time works in general.
See the lyrics.
Yeah.
There are certain hymns where the lyrics are from, 200 AD.
There's a process of becoming a classic.
Right.
Yeah.
So a hymn that is from 200 AD has clear differences from a hymn that is from 1970, where you have references to cars, automobiles, and planes, as opposed to this 200 AD hymn where not so much. So I think that connection is valuable, and however you have it is important. Just have it, maintain your honor to God. The glory has to be there. And I think that they both have it to a very high regard. I personally don't have the same connection that I know you do. And I think that it's an important thing for us both to have what we want in this regard. I think there's definitely room for both to inhabit the worship. And I mean, and
certainly room for both to improve and to get better, because to act as if any worship style is some steady state, solid, complete understanding of God and who he says he is to sell God incredibly short.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that we don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
And worship is just our best attempt at expressing our thoughts and feelings towards him about who he is and what he's done for us. And we could never really fully even comprehend or imagine what he's done for us until we get to heaven and see him face to face. And I think that day, we won't be able to stop worshiping.
Yeah.
And I think every tribe, nation, and tongue, it's not going to matter whether or not you like hymns or whether you like, rap or contemporary music. You're just going to start singing, and it's going to be a really, really glorious noise. So it's something to look forward to, bro.
Couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, I know, dude. It's really big. I get those chills whenever like heaven even comes up. You're like, ooh,
feeling it.
Little chills and stuff like that.
I know the sentiment.
But I think going a little bit apart from worship per se, but it's definitely going into more traditional conservatism. I know you morally have so many traditional values about you, which are a great thing, and I think even the phrase traditional values has become politicized in a way that it's easy to attack, by different groups. And it seems a lot left-right. It seems to get really associated with the right and just the evangelical Christianity, that if you're traditional, you've got to be conservative, you've got to be red, and you've got to be this, that, and the other, and you can't have any other feelings. Yeah, exactly. Your face says it all, but it's not necessarily the case, where we've drawn lines where there didn't need to be, especially when it comes to values, because to alienate almost half the country based on whether or not,
it's a shame.
Yeah,
it shouldn't have happened. It's sad that we are where we are, and not only like as a country, but as a church. Yeah, that the church has gone in so many separate ways. It's very sad. We have, to some degree, of introspective look that we can comfort ourselves with, being that I still believe that he's saved and he'll be going to heaven. Sure, I disagree with him on whether or not the presence of Christ is actually inhabiting the host. Yeah. Okay, but regardless of that, we're still in the same boat. We're still going to heaven. We still believe. We can still have the connection. That this is the important part within our religion. I mean, outside of that, the whole name calling aspect of I'm going to be red, I'm going to be blue, I'm going to be pink, orange, yellow, or green. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I don't care what you are. It's just
it's a bit of a trap too. It's an extremely dangerous trap because it'll go back to identity in terms of I think I'll say we loosely mistakenly attribute certain moral values to a certain party, but that party is inherently governed by people. You can pray as much as you want that God oversees, the actions of said party one way or the other, and that it's glorifying to him. But as soon as the values become more attributed to a party and to people than they do to the Lord and to Christ, you make people into gods. And you start expecting people to live up to standards that they were not designed, well, they were designed, but that they can't possibly live up to. They will not be living up to, and we are so surprised when we don't live up to them. But we've placed unbelievable standards and expectations on, men and women in office, in political office.
Mortals.
Mortals, yes. Sinners.
There we go.
Broken, depraved, decrepit individuals. Yes.
As we love to say, sinful sinners, sinfully sinning, sinful sin. So sin. Yeah. And to expect purity out of sinners, good luck with that. Mm-hmm. It's never going to be the case. Yeah. We can pray for our leaders, and we can vote for new ones, but they're still going to be sinners. I vividly remember a sermon where the pastor talked about two individuals coming to him and complaining that they were at odds with each other, and when they'd met each other, they thought the other was doing really well and was a great individual. And the pastor looks at them and goes, "What? You found out he's a sinner?" The big shocker is revealed. Anybody you elect is going to be sinful, and you're not going to get everything you want. Mm-hmm. I think that expecting it or voting a certain way to demand perfection is...
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of our surprise and our frustration comes from the fact that we've implicitly idolized a lot of figures that we should not have elevated to the stature that they are.
That's very true.
When we begin to understand that, the Holy Spirit can work and operate through anybody and anything, but Satan's also right around the corner, and we've got to understand that there is a spiritual battle going on for each and every soul. And just because somebody's looking good on paper one day before, the time comes to cast your vote, does not mean that they're going to be the same person 6 months later, after they've won or after they've lost. And it's incredibly interesting to me, again, how we're just so surprised. We're so surprised that people are people and make mistakes, and there's certainly room for rebuke. I'm not going to act as if the actions are any more condonable because they're sinners. No, your sin is not justified because you're a sinner. It helps us to understand, but it doesn't justify you at all.
Exactly. You don't get to just say, I'm a sinner, therefore I'm going to sin.
Yeah.
Obviously we don't want to be sinful. We will have our mistakes, but we want to be Christ-like. Mm-hmm. And we want to have that expectation that others will be Christ-like, and I think that is very important to push people in that regard, especially as college students. We have peer pressure everywhere we look, anywhere you turn. Peer pressure is a huge, impactful thing, and I think that looking to your friends and holding them accountable is just a huge step for me. It's helped me. I try to have my network of friends that will push me in the right direction when I sit there and start making a decision that may not be the best for myself. Yeah. And I think that our sinfulness cannot be used as this crutch where we'll sit there and hide behind, I'm a sinner, I can't not sin. It's kind of ridiculous.
And there's also, I think more so, what gets me, not necessarily the surprise that we have, even though that's certainly something oh my gosh, they made a mistake. Yes, they made a mistake. They're human, guys. But after realizing that so-and-so has made this mistake or made this remark, that there's an unwillingness to forgive. There's such a high standard of accountability, and there is no room for forgiveness. there is no room to concede any amount of mercy or grace to people who we've deemed should be gods, I guess, you know? Do you get that vibe at all?
I know what you're saying in that search for people to act perfectly in the massive punishment, and I think that
Public punishment.
Very public.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with this call-out culture on Instagram, you sit there and at this person and bam, everybody's at. I think that the main importance is having that network of friends that will sit there and say, whoa, bro, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Are you good? Dude, do we need to talk? You want to go get lunch? I mean, let's hash this out. Let's have our discussion. Let's reevaluate. If you can sit there and have your network of friends that will sit there and say, whoa, dude, calm down, put yourself on the right path, that's awesome. I want myself to have this group, and I think that I have this group where if I were to make poor decisions, they would sit there and say, you should not do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of that is my family, but part of that is, I mean, my friends that are looking out for me.
Yeah, I mean, iron sharpens iron, bro, and, you know, a threefold cord is not easily broken. There's certainly instances where, I mean, there can be radical rebellion and somebody goes far, far, far off the deep end, but nobody's beyond saving. Nobody's beyond forgiveness. Nobody's beyond the grace and the mercy and the reach of Christ and his love for us. It's just incredibly difficult because it is personal, and because we have such deep, meaningful relationships with these people who are making hurtful decisions, not helpful decisions. You know, even if it's not necessarily sin, sometimes you're just, okay, common wisdom would say, don't get involved with this, or don't continue this relationship, or don't this, that, or the other thing. I'm so incredibly blessed, like you said, to have a close network of friends whom I can call, text, FaceTime, meet up with and get lunch and say, hey, I'm struggling with this right now, and I need your help, and I need you to beat that help into me, because I do have this callous, sinful heart that doesn't like to receive rebuke and criticism. And so it's a constant need for community, a constant need for correction. Not that this isn't even meant to be like doom and gloom, you know, Christianity either, where we're just so totally depraved that there's no way that we could find happiness. No, the whole reason we have correctness is so that we can find joy and happiness and peace, right? It's not just because we want to go around rebuking and correcting people all the time and making them feel bad. It's because there's genuinely something better, something that is so much better than we can even ask for or imagine, called Christ. Right? And his love and a relationship with him will do more for us than any selfish decision we could ever make, you know. And when we have people who can remind us of that fact, then life is so much better than the other way around. It's so much better to have people who can say to me, Cody, you need to stop living in lust right now. You need to stop being bitter about this one thing. You need to get over this. You need to stop putting your identity in things that it did not deserve to be in. And you need to wake up to the fact that there are people around you who love you and care for you and want the absolute best for you, you know. And that's stuff we need to hear, you know. And I don't know if we always get it.
Well, I know that we don't always get it. I mean, obviously we see. I have friends. I myself am sinful at times. We all are. And having that person that will sit there and say, that was wrong, is so helpful, as you've described. And I'll bring it back to a point I made earlier about wanting to be not just a good individual, but to be an exceptional father. Yeah. Because for me, if I've made errors, if I've made mistakes, the first people to correct me have so frequently been my mother, my father. Will sit there and say, well, this is not a good decision. It's not always out of love, but doesn't always necessarily feel that way. Yeah. But
maybe not the most gentle kind of love.
Exactly. Yeah. But most certainly out of love. And being able to sit there and acknowledge that and to take that and grow from it, so that one day you not only have grown for it, but can lead your own friends, your own family, your own children in that manner is what we should strive for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I mean, God will bring you through something so that you can bring other people through it as well. I mean, that's the entire methodology of coaching in general.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think you understand this, having coached chess, having taken literally personal experiences, winning matches, losing matches, correcting yourself, and then imparting that upon the next generation of players. I absolutely need to look back and dive into, honestly, the embarrassing parts of my high school tennis career and say, okay, this is what I don't want these kids to do.
Right.
And those are honestly the areas where I am so stern and quick in my rebuke of them with attitude and with selfish shot selection, where I took so long to figure out that I could not be prideful on the court. It just wasn't helpful, and I do despise it, but it's because I despised it so long in myself that I coach the way I do, and because I have my experience with pride and with selfishness and with all these different things that I'm now able to say, hopefully in love and with gentleness and clarity, and eloquence. This is what you need to steer away from, guys.
Right.
This will take you down a darker path than you want to be on. Rather, I would much prefer you to be going down this way, the way that leads to fruit and life and joy and sportsmanship, where you can take the sports that we talked about earlier, pull them into life and say, you can be better mothers with this. You can be better fathers with this. You can't be a selfish father. You can't be a prideful wife.
Of course not.
You have to submit everything to Christ and let him govern your thoughts and your mind. And that hopefully comes across when I'm saying it, but it only comes across when it hits home for me, and it has to have hit home for me. And that's, I think, where I've struggled a little bit initially, because sometimes I'll kind of be preaching something, coaching something when I'm still going through it.
Right.
And can't believe it. And so there's a lack of confidence there where I haven't actually convinced myself that this is the better way, especially in terms of selfishness.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a little bit more empathy there in the sense that, look, I can say, I know this is what you want to do, because that's what I would want to do, right? And that's the bold, honest truth. I would want to hit that shot, but this is what you got to do. And this is what you need to do. This is how you got to react to that situation. You can't throw your racket. You got to keep your head down, think through things, get reset, and go and do your thing.
That's a very difficult thing to do, especially in a sport, an individual sport of that nature, where you're in control. Any failure is yours, and
I feel like you're in control.
That's fair. That's fair.
The ball's only on your racket half the time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point, but you are the only one you should blame, that you can blame for your mistakes. There isn't another there.
Right.
And
there's no teammate to bash in the face.
Exactly. But to be able to look inward is a skill that you intrinsically gain from tennis. As a baseball player, looking inward not always as easy. I mean, I could sit there and say, he didn't do this well enough. He didn't do that. So for me, I've had this kind of separate struggle of sitting there and not pushing things on other people, not trying to say, man, I can't trust him anymore, but to overcome that and to forgive, and learning that forgiveness of my teammates has been a massive part, because I so frequently remember in high school, I can't let him hit the ball. No one will make a play. Got to strike everyone out. Yeah. It's not the way to go.
Yeah, you got to trust your team.
But I'm sitting there, I'm trying to play the whole team on my own, and it's not the way that life works. It's not the way to play this game of life. So, and
especially in doubles, you said it really, really well, and that you've got to be able to trust your team. You can't carry everything on your own. I played mixed doubles a lot in high school, and particularly in mixed doubles, there's a stereotype that the guys will want to play singles and kind of almost push the girls off the court in a way. Either that or aim directly at the girls and, quote, get an easy winner. It's not as easy as it sounds, because many of the girls are very, very, very good. But it was certainly something that I had to deal with in terms of encouraging my partner, and not only allowing her to succeed, but celebrating her success and trusting her to succeed, and not trying to steal shots from her, not trying to cover 90% of the court and push her off into the left alley or the right alley, but say, hey, here's what we can do. I know you can do it. Fist bump, high five, whatever it is. If you make a mistake, you make a correction and you move forward. There's no room to look back. There's no room to feel sorry about yourself or have any animosity towards them, because you got to play the rest of the match with them.
Yeah.
You got to keep going.
It's one thing to be able to dominate a game, and to control it. It's another thing to be able to empower your teammate to play their best game. And I'll say I really had this opportunity last year. I was very fortunate. I came into a tremendous player to play with me. Yeah. And my game prior to this had been that of the man. Yeah. The one that controls the game and dominates everything. Yeah. Just play it, beat everybody down, and win. And I went to a tournament in Chicago, and I played with him, and midway through the day, I had this realization that I'm not going to be the one. Yeah. This dude is so great when I empower him to be great.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not going to support him the way he needs to be supported, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
We're not going to have success. We're not going to beat this team. That team over there is one of the best teams ever. We're not going to beat him if I don't play his game.
Yeah.
So gaining that perspective and that scope in Chicago was so huge that later in the year when we went to nationals, I could sit there and the whole day just feed him, make sure he's got this condition for him to perform. Because whenever he performs, we won. We would win everything if he keeps performing. The moment that I started to try and take it, and I remember it vividly. Yeah. I remember that game. I sat there and I tried to do it on my own. I didn't need him. I had these guys. I knew exactly what I needed to do to win, and we lost.
Yeah.
But learning this experience of just let him do his thing, help him do his thing, empower him. It's one of those life lessons that's so hard to teach, and it's so fantastic when you've gotten to feel that emotion of being there for it.
And I think that, we'll bring it all the way back to basketball. That's why there's a stat called assists.
Indeed.
And we'll bring it back to LeBron James even more so than that, where he is, I think statistically, if not the top, but one of the top leaders in all-time assists.
Yeah, I think he's broke the list. He's 10th now. I saw it about a week ago. He's
so incredibly good, and commentators will talk about his passing being incredibly underrated, but he is so good at, any team he plays with immediately becomes a contender for the national championship. Right. The Lakers, you can have a little bit of a discussion right now, but in the past 14 years,
how well is Cleveland doing right now without him?
They just got out of last in the East. I think they're second last right now. They're 2 games over the Knicks, maybe. I could be wrong on that.
So first to almost last, right? And the fact that they had stolen last from the Knicks.
Yeah. Love both teams. And everyone's a professional that plays, but you look at, we'll bring it back to LeBron James because I think this is what this is about, how he physically empowers a community by his presence. Forget the team. Forget the 15 people who are on the court with him.
Yeah.
Think about the city of Cleveland and how better off Cleveland probably is because LeBron James came back to that town. There's a lot of stuff going on in this country. There's a lot of stuff going on in our inner cities. There's a ton of stuff going on in Cleveland, and it wasn't looking very, very good for a while there.
Yeah.
But the fact that, LeBron came back and he got them a win. He got them a championship win. The Browns aren't going to get you that anytime soon, right? You're not going to look to, the next Browns quarterback for your salvation. It's not going to come from there. But LeBron's ability to empower a team, to empower a city, and he is a good guy. Let's not sell that short.
Yeah, no.
He is a father. He's a family man. He has built schools, and he is still one of the best, if not the best of all time in his vocation, in his craft. Yeah. And so I look at him and I say, okay, not how do I be the next LeBron James, but how do I take what LeBron has done and pour that into whatever it is that I'm doing? How do I look at the people around me and set them up for success and give them the ball, the assist?
Yes.
Put them in great position to straight up dunk on life. That's a pretty cheesy analogy, but it's what it is.
It's the truth. This is the description that you're giving of being the exceptional quality person.
Yeah.
Being a quality person exceptionally. Doing your vocation the best you can. Being the best engineer ever. Being the best salesman ever. Being the best carpenter. Being the best whatever you are, the best at it, while being the best father, while being the best husband, and while sitting there and holding yourself in high esteem and maintaining your relationship with Christ. There's so many aspects, and you can see them actually quite visibly in, as you've pointed out, LeBron. It's all there. Yeah. You sit there and you say, I'm not LeBron. I'll never be LeBron. I won't be celebrated like LeBron.
Yeah.
But I can do what he's done as a father, and I can do what he's done as a father better than him. And I can become better than LeBron.
Yeah. And
it's not to put myself over a person.
But I understand the heart behind what you're saying. And I think one thing, if I could just cap off that bit of the conversation is to say that the Spirit is kind of passing us the ball, and it's the Spirit of Christ, no less, who is coming into our lives, who we get the privilege and the honor of abiding with for all of eternity, and saying, this presence gives us grace, sanctifies us, and allows us to be the best at what we do, or amazing or great at what we do. Forget the best, forget about being the best, but just about being great and excelling and pushing forward in what we do. It cannot be done without the Spirit of Christ guiding us every single step of the way. You talk about a good player making a team better. Like, talk about Christ making eternity better.
Right.
How many lives? I think 2 billion nominally on the earth right now, whom Christ is in and with always, and beyond those 2 billion, how many lives he is still working in through those 2 billion by his Spirit. And even just in isolation, you hear crazy stories, people from Africa having dreams, never having encountered the gospel before. Christ is still reaching into people's hearts. His Spirit is still giving them the ball and saying, all right, what are you going to do with it now? Right? Here's the message. What are you going to do? Are you going to go out and play for yourself, or are you going to play for me? Are you going to magnify me in my name and make it great? So we got that decision to make.
Certainly we're all winners if we know which decision to make there.
Mm-hmm. And the game's already been won, bro. It's a weird clock management system. It's a weird clock management system.
We play as hard as we can for something we've already won, and that's the beauty of it.
It's overtime in a way. I
suppose we've already got 1 point in hockey. You get a point for making it to OT. I don't know. Yeah.
It's incredible.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see what life holds. I'm excited to see where the Spirit takes me in my life and my journey. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm along for the ride. Here we go.
But, well, I don't think I can think of a better way to end the conversation. Can you?
I think that's it. Let's have a prayer, maybe?
Yeah, sounds good, bro.
All right. Lord of mercy, Christ of mercy, Lord have mercy. Dear Lord, thank you for this time together that we've shared. Thank you this wonderful conversation that you've given us, a time to grow, a time to learn about one another, and hopefully a time to impact those listening so that they can also grow within you. All the glory be to you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Amen.